Thank you very much. And I should have earlier, when I was speaking this morning, said a happy St. Nicholas Day to my colleagues. We're in the Netherlands, they're gift giving today, but I don't think the same could be said for here. I can actually understand now the saying when people say it was a game of two halves, because I think there are many aspects which we can speak positively about, and there are some good initiatives. But due to the time constraints, I'm obviously going to highlight the areas where I have a concern and where I feel would need more considered attention. And I do need to also say on the time constraints, I do think we need to look at an element where we have an opportunity for senators to have statements, and the Minister, who I greatly admire, but actually took up a quarter of our time that senators have in which to give their statements. Minister Howland yesterday in the Chamber talked about how we need to ensure that the burden of our economic recovery is shared fairly. Sometimes I wonder, because we talk of Ireland having experienced 4 years of hardship, which conjures up some sort of notion that before that everything was okay. And unfortunately it wasn't. For many of the groups that we're all talking about today and we're raising, it was not okay. Things were not just fine. The reality is that the painful process of adjustment that Minister Howland spoke of yesterday impacts overwhelmingly and disproportionately on those who are and were already vulnerable, while at the same time there remain significant numbers of Irish citizens who are insulated and largely unscathed by this afternoon's and yesterday's announcements. I do understand that it's unrealistic to expect that everybody has the same standard of living, but we should be striving for a greater equality of opportunity, for which the very foundation must be protection from poverty, hardship and despair. Minister, can you confirm, as just one example, that the VAT hike at 2%, which will absorb 1% of the disposable income of the bottom 10% of earners and only 0.35% of the top 10% of earners, is an example of every effort being made to ensure that the burden of our economic recovery is shared fairly? I also need to note that I felt yesterday we have a budget that's split in two pieces, but actually it's split in multiple pieces. We still have a situation where each minister is producing various statements, details, and I'm still trying to work through all the details of it. But just some of the areas. Reducing the back-to-school clothing and footwear allowance. That severe impact on families. Now, perhaps the Minister did hint, the Minister for Education in his announcements, that perhaps they'd look at directly offsetting that towards school uniforms or school books. I would have liked to see those announcements coming forward. I'd also like to urge caution to my colleagues and the Minister for Social Protection. In her notes yesterday, compared child benefit rates with other countries. If you want to compare, then compare like with like. Child benefit rates, while in Ireland are high, compared to other countries, in those other countries they give free childcare, free school books, free uniforms, free healthcare. So when we compare, let's compare like with like. Many of my colleagues, and I raised it this morning about the disability allowance for young people. The rationale is that we don't want young people with disabilities to be dependent on an allowance. But many of these young people have profound and multiple disabilities. They're not going into training schemes or work placements, irrespective of their desire to integrate and participate fully in society. And I realise that many people are getting allowances that we might question about, but I'm talking about the ones with multiple and profound disabilities. I really do feel that there's no rationale for this, and I really would urge that it would be reconsidered. Also, there is confusion as to whom the cut in disability allowance will apply. I'd like to ask the Minister to confirm that no one currently in receipt of the allowance will have their payment reduced. This morning, under the order of business, I took the opportunity to raise a number of questions, and I am disappointed that I have not heard any answers today in the opening from the Minister in relation to lone parents. They are hugely fearful and scared at the moment. I talked to a number of them today. Budget 2012 introduced a number of measures which I think will have a severe impact on parents. Last year we did have some measures. They expected more. They didn't expect the drastic changes so quickly, so fastly coming upon them. And so I tried to look at the figures to justify the decisions, because I'm trying to look at this fairly and look at how we justify these decisions. I cannot find the rationale. We've put questions to the Department of Social Protection. There are no figures to justify this decision. Also, again, the lack of clarity on how the cuts are to be implemented and what are the transitional arrangements. Finally, I know budgets are about choices, and you can say it's easy for me to say these things. But for example, the government decision to keep alcohol excise duty at the same slash levels as previous governments means they've lost the opportunity to generate 178 million. If they generated that, we wouldn't have had to make the changes to loan parents, disability services, fuel allowances or student fees. Thank you.